winter was very cold, and I had pneumonia, and that frightened Grandma terribly of the northern winters right then and there. She didn't want to see. The doctor said not to try another winter, so Grandpa was on the road at that time for Carrie State Company, and he took us along with him. People used to do that, and I was quite small, you see, and but they went by train. So he went from city to city selling Carrie Safes, and we lived right along, and that's how I got in the habit of eating bread and milk, because in those southern cities, the dinner was not held until 7 or 8, and I did eat before that time. So Grandma used to feed me bread and milk every night and put me to bed. And that's the bread and milk that still hangs over me now. But I still eat bread and milk.
Now, I'll tell you something. When you traveled with Grandpa, did you stay in hotels?
No, we said boarding houses.
Boarding houses.
How many times did you have pneumonia?
4 times when I was little. 4 times before I was 7, and bronchitis 3 times. So we traveled around, and we settled in Washington, and Grandpa was given that area.
How old then when you went?
I was about 4, I guess, at that time. I was still pretty small, but I didn't go to school. I spent so many winters in bed that I had to learn to walk over time and again. I had to really start to learn to walk. And the bronchitis in between. I know we used to live in those solid rows of houses, and people on both sides would hear me cough all night. I imagine they were ready to choke me. But but I know Mr. Elwood was to come up and read the funny papers to him. He was a queer little old man, and he was certainly the last person you'd expect to read funny papers to somebody, but my father would never read the funny papers to me. But neither Elwood else, apparently, because Mr. Elwood used to come up and take pity on me and read me funnies, and on Sunday afternoon especially. And I was quite grown up kindergarten, I guess, before I started there, because I was sick so much. And I remember Grandma used to rub that mentolatum or something. Oh, it's worse than that.
Skunk oil used to use.
Skunk oil was one of those things. And mentolatum.
Your chest.
And I took so much emulsion, stopped the emulsion. I took about a gallon. It seemed like I got paid 10 cents a piece. A dose. And I don't know whatever happened to my leg. I must have accumulated quite a lot, because I certainly took a lot of Scott's emulsion. And what was that for?
Custard, like?
Supposed to taste it off.
It had the royal in it. That was worth 10 cents a dose. And my father used to go on the road for a month at a time. It was an ordinary thing. But when he went to San Francisco to the earthquake, he was gone a month. 5 or 6 weeks. And he came back loaded with things. And he went to the Grand Station in Washington Walk, because there was nobody just took taxis in those days, heaven's sake. And he had some valise. I can still smell it. When he opened that valise, it smelled so leathery, And he collected stuff, and I was rummaged through it. That's like Nancy likes to do it. And I can still smell that old rubber valise and leather. And it was a wonderful time when Papa came home. I'll tell you that. And he came and he talked all night, and there weren't much interested in Ethel and I until the next morning. And it was a great time, because we had missed him so much.
Tell them about your Christmases that you had.
Oh, the Christmases. Grandpa couldn't do enough for Christmas. And we used to have wonderful trees. And of course, in those days, we had regular candles and lighted candles. And then on occasion, he would light the candles and not leave them on for a long time because they were dangerous, that's all. And we would go out in the street and look in and admire the trees with all those pretty candles. And we had some of those ornaments for years and years. And I know we used to, he didn't decorate the tree till Christmas after I'd gone to bed. It never did till I was married did we decorate the tree for our children. But it was really a sensible thing to do because I was so tired. I used to, when Richard was little, we didn't decorate the tree. And Daddy came home from the post office like a dead man. And he could hardly walk, but hardly speak. He's so tired. So we gave that up and decorated the tree in the daytime, which was more sensible. But it was a wonderful story Grandpa could tell about Santa Claus and the brownies. Oh, he made the brownies.
I can remember the brownies.
I think I saw one.
Yes. Sure, he could tell us running his fingers over the brownies and they'd run off. And you could sleep.
Boy, we made a lot of noise when we turned on Christmas brownies. They sure.
No brownies.
They sure did.
Yeah.
They're like elves. What did he say? That he came down and the brownies were there when he got presents?
One time he told me about Santa Claus reindeers, and I know I woke up in the middle of the night and went to the window, and I swore I could see Santa Claus in the sleigh. Oh no, I still can see it.
You never know. I used to see kids, because they used to be able to see Rudolph's nose.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it was wonderful. He had a wonderful way of telling about Santa Claus, and it makes you believe it. I know once Joan about when she was little, and she said something about and she told voice about bass. She scared herself. He thought he was telling you about the brownies. And I know when Harold was little, we bought him a book about the brownies, but I never saw the book again. And I don't know what happened to it, but it was a wonderful book.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I'll tell you some things about my childhood. I was born in Darien Center in the year 1903. The farm right next to where Grandma Welker lived. Yeah, that's right. And from 1906, we saw the first cars used to come through. That's about the first time that they come through in Western New York. Roads were all dirt roads and had ruts this deep in them. That's why your cars were so high in those days. The cars were up this high. That's right, ruts that deep that you had to drive through. Yeah, well, they were all that way then. They were all that way up anyway at that time. And I do remember one thing. We moved to another farm about 6 years old again. But anyway, one time I remember one thing. We went out with two of my brothers, I guess Johnny and Otto and I was probably 4 or 5 and they were 6, 7, 8, and 9. We went out in the chicken house and we started throwing eggs all around them. We threw all the eggs that the chickens had laid on and threw them all over the chicken house. Because we didn't know any better at the time. We got it that night. We really got it. They really got it that night. Well, anyway, about 6 years old, we moved to another farm. And that farm, of course, was a good-sized farm, 125 acres or so. And on that farm, we had the biggest number of barns anywhere in West New York. The greatest number of barns in a cluster. And it was the farm that the Fishers used to own. He was a judge, Judge Fisher. And they owned this monstrous big house, which was the biggest house in Western New York. It had this big veranda around 2 sides of it. The veranda was Well, from here to over there, that is probably 20 foot wide, the veranda was on two sides of this house. In the middle of the house was a big corridor, 15, 20 foot wide, went right through this big house. It was a monster big house. It was really the biggest house in Western North.
And on the side of the house was a portico where you could drive in and
Yeah, that's right. There was a portico all over it. Yeah, big portico. Well, this Judge Fisher had a lot of race horses, and we used to raise these race horses at a racetrack somewhere. I don't know where the racetrack was. I don't know what they call it. And Judge Fisher had a son, Carlton Fisher, who also turned out to be a state Supreme Court judge. And they were very friendly with our family, especially with my older brother, Ernie. They were good pals. Well, then on this farm, there was a gas well. A gas well that you used to build up a little gas in it, and we used to go in and throw matches down here to watch it explode up in this.
Right.
And finally we threw so many stones in it and just plugged it right up to the top, so of course there was no more gas coming out then. And on this farm was a sand pit. All sand pit, big sand pit, not too far from the road, but all this sand was used to help build the highway when they paved it, see? And across the road was a farm that had all gravel pits. Here they were less than a quarter of a mile apart, sand on one side of the road and gravel on the other side, which were left there from the ice age. So this way it happened to be left there. There's two ponds, one on one side of the road, one on the other side of the road. And because a few things like that I do kind of remember those things. Well, now I'll get back to Christmas. We used to go to the church service, Methodist church service every Christmas Eve. They always had a Santa Claus, and each one of us got a little box of hard candy about that size. A little bit of packets of hard candy. That was the candy. That's all we got from the church. And then we'd go home. My Christmas was a lot different than Grandma Welker was. We had, of course, had the Christmas lights with the candles on them too. We had to light the candles. You wouldn't dare leave them on very long. It'd burn the house down. In fact, a lot of houses did burn down from these candles on the trees. See? Well, all I ever had for Christmas was they'd hang up a stocking. I'd get an orange, a couple walnuts, and maybe a little homemade candy. That was all I ever had for Christmas. That's the way our Christmases were when we were little. We didn't have anything like that. Well, of course, I was the youngest of 10 children, see, which made a difference. And Grandma was 2 children, actually. It makes a big difference in the things that you had.
How many children did you have?
10. I was the youngest of 10. Yeah.
Well, it's a murder. I
Yeah.
think it's happening too.
Yeah, so that was, yeah.
That
Well, of course, to get back when I was born, my mother died. She was just 40 years old. I was 14 months old when my mother died. I never knew a mother. And my sisters had to take care of me, which they did, I'm sure, did a pretty good job on it. I guess that's where I got the name Allyn from. I think from my sister's name. And
his aunt and uncle wanted to adopt him, but they wouldn't let him go.
no, they wouldn't let me go. They wouldn't keep me. I was to go down back to the farm again. We used to have a lot of the chimneys used to burn out in those days, which set houses on fire. So the soot would gather in the chimneys from the wood stoves, and many a time our chimney would catch fire. And you'd have to go out to get out of the house and sure the house would burn down. And it's wait till it burned itself out, then it would stop. And also, this big house that I was telling you about burned up one night in the middle of the night, and that woke us all up, of course. Scared us, of course, very much. The house burned right down to the ground. This monstrous big house. So that was one thing that upset me, and when I was young, give me nerves and Yeah, I guess I probably did, yeah. Well, then later on,
Farmers leaving it right
yeah,
down.
farmers, and we always figured they'd set it afire, but then had a boiler or something for heat, and didn't keep enough water in the boiler. We figured they did on purpose, but they shouldn't. Well, anyway, then we went on, and meantime, my father had died when I was 14 years old. And Otto and Johnny and I, we had to run the farm one year. We did it all. I was about 14, and Johnny was 17, Otto was 19. So we run this big farm, the three of us all alone. And we'd put in over 100 loads of hay by hand into the barn. Then on Armistice Night, 1918, at the end of the war, Otto and I were doing the chores, and I had lighted an oil stove in the milk house to heat the water to wash all the milk things. In the meantime, we were in milking the cows, and all of a sudden the barn caught on fire. That was on Armistice Night. Burned everything down. We got some of the cattle out, and some of the horses we couldn't get out. Because when the horses, they're so frightened about fire, you can't get them out over fire. They want over fire. Couldn't get the horses out, so they all burned. We got some of the cows out, and the calves and pigs and other things that were available. Well, anyway, that was the end of that barn. So I've had two experiences in my life with fire that kind of made a difference in my being the way I am sometimes. I can't help it.
Oh, no wonder we never had a fireplace in the house.
Yeah.
We were coming from Buffalo, and we were at town line, and we could see the fire from Wilson's barn.
Yeah.
First town line.
Very mild.
Because there's a lot of hay.
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
And it was on the knoll.
When they rebuilt the barn, they built it on the same spot?
It's still the same spot, but not as big a barn. No, just the one big barn.
Yeah.
Must have been old then. I mean, it was dry wood.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, with hay.
Okay.
Is there a house still there?
Yeah.
The house is not the big house, the other house, the farmhouse is there where we live. We live in the...
About all the stories I remember you telling us about the big leather chair up in your bedroom.
Oh, but that's a chair. Well, I used to have to get up, go and help me with the cows when I was 6 years old. And it was kind of hard to get up in the morning. And, I didn't want to get up, so they'd all go outside to milk, and I'd still stay under the cover to keep warm, didn't want to get up. So they used to come in and pick me up and set me on this cold leather chair.
No heat in the bedroom.
No heat in the bedroom. No heat in the bedroom. Yeah, I did that one. Yeah, well, this bedroom, we used to have 12 people sleeping in that bedroom. We had four beds, with 2 people in each bed. It was a big, long room, all length of the house. And then they'd have 2 mattresses on the floor. So there was 12 of us sleeping in this one room. You can imagine it's like a dormitory.
Quite a big
Well, I can remember that house.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was the hired man's house.
That's right.
Bernie lived in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The whole east is still there. We're a little of the house east from the width of the house on the east side.
And that room, that house had a tremendous big kitchen in it too.
I remember that.
The kitchen.
From the woodshed into the kitchen.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Does somebody live in that house now?
Yeah.
Yeah, but somebody owns the farm. I guess they have a hired man living in it there.
Right out to see it.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, the kids might want to see it.
We should have.
It's in Grandma's house we have to. Grandma's house the one
On the hill.
there's a door and there's a house over there like that, right? You know, the same. Yeah, the Victorian with the gingerbread. I like that house.
That house has a fireplace in it now.
Grandpa's old house, yeah.
The house.
And a big window.
Yes, we've been by the last time. But it looks good.
Yes, it does look good.
Tell about the frog. Your fossil.
Oh yeah, one time there was a creek run through the farm, and I was down one time. We used to play around the creek. and I picked up a fossil in the shape of a frog. It was perfect frog, and it had been fossilized. I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't have it anymore, whether somebody took it or what. I did. Yeah. It was perfect shape of a frog. You thought it was a frog.
Now this the Christmas entertainment that we had at church, it was all the children took part and sang and recited, had to hold up your letter, we did a lot of that and sing a lot. And Mr. Grandpa Welker was always at church. You could count on Mr. Welker being at church as much as the minister. He was always there. So that is a trait that's good to carry on.
Well, he sang in the choir too, always sang in the choir.
Tell them about when you were in the little choir, the little chorus of the Welker boys.
Oh, well.
The little quartet.
Well, we used to sing at funerals. But they weren't all boys. One of my sisters, I guess one of my sisters, 4 of us used to go around and sing at funerals whenever we were asked.
Because they were home.
Yeah, and the funerals were always in the home and all the things.
And how old were you when you started to trumpet?
Well, I was probably 11. I was playing in the band when I was 12. Probably about 11. No, I just picked it up myself. Well, the brothers were all musical. They all played instruments. So it came to me quite
What did they play?
Well, clarinet and saxophone up there. He played in the circus band. He played in the army band. And one of the brothers played the bass horn.
Otto played trumpet.
Otto played bass horn. Otto played bass horn. Carl played trombone. He's a pretty good trombone player. Waller, the oldest one, tenor horn, which is something like a baritone, not quite like a baritone. So we all played something. He'd have some music with that stuff.
Uncle Ernie went to military school. He had the nerve to ask his father to go, and none of the rest of them had the nerve to ask him. Mr. Welker was a very severe man, and Ernie had the only one that had nerve enough to ask him to send him to military school because Carlton Fisher was going to military school. And Mr. Welker sent him. But none of the rest of them got the nerve to ask him, and they didn't get to go either.
Now, I was the only one of the 10 of us that graduated from high school. But I had to do that mostly on my own. I had to earn my own money to go to high school.
That was terrible.
No, but I had to pay board. I had to pay board.
Grandpa had to go to high school. He lived in Darien, but he had to go to Buffalo.
Yeah, we used to go 25 miles on the train to go to school. And you see, we had to get up early in the morning, take the train, and get into school at 9 o'clock.
And 2 years he went as far as April, and his money gave out, and nobody helped him up to go. He had to give up that year, a whole year, and start the next year, right where he started the year before, and they went to April again. I don't know how he ever did graduate from high school.
Well, that was during the war. During World War I, when the farmers had to have some help, so they let the boys, a lot of them, get out of school to go and help the folks with the farm crops and things. So I did have to stop. Probably 2 years I had to stop. But I did finally make it. No.
He boarded in Buffalo.
Yeah, I boarded in Buffalo. Some part of the time, yeah. Part of the time.
He worked at Jackson's ice cream place up on Main Street one time, and he lived and boarded out for days way out East Sullivan.
Portland Avenue.
East Sullivan. Beyond the city line and
Charlie Sharp?
Yeah, Charlie.
end of the line.
Well, let's see, and in 1920, I guess I graduated from high school in 1921, and I guess in the fall I started playing in a theater, a Broadway theater, in a movie house.
In New York City?
No, on Buffalo, on Broadway, the Broadway studio there. And the next year I'd broken my ankle just before graduation, so I had to get my diploma with crutches. The next year I went to McCabe and lived with my sister for a couple of years down there in McCabe, and I played we played movie and vaudeville in McCabe. And then next year, that would be 1923 or so, I guess, I went down. Well, I also played in Corning. I played in movie and vaudeville houses in Corning, New York, in Watertown, New York, and then I went to Red Bank, New Jersey, and played down there for a couple of years.
While he was there, he took lessons.
Oh, yeah.
Goodman.
Goldman, Edwin Frankel Goldman, the great leader of the Goldman Band. I used to go into New York every Sunday to take a lesson from him.
You had to pay $25, but way back then.
No, not that much. No.
He did. Is that the guy who I did?
There was a pianist that had to pay $25 for his lessons. The pianist was making about $50 weekly and $25 for a lesson.
It took something to go on a train.
Yeah, sure. I never must have.
No.
Probably, I think I started at $35 a week down there that day. And I got up to 40. And that was about the end of that, and I had to come back. I had to come back and get married.
Enough was enough, couldn't stand on it, I say.
When you went to the post office, they thought that was a wonderful thing. He thought, well, that's a good job. It's dependable and secure. And we were getting $2,100 a year.
Oh, I started lifting at $1,800 next day. $1,800 next day.
They were right, it was dependable.
Well, $21 was dependable, but of course, during the Depression, they cut us back a lot. Oh, yeah,
So
sure.
we never had a payless payday.
No, we always had something, but it was about half. Yeah, very small. Most of we didn't lose our house, and we kept our house. Of course, I was doing dance work, too, at the time to make money, so we did keep our house.
Three drivers went to 50 miles to get $5.
Yeah.
Is Uncle Richard born during the Depression?
Yes, he was
Yeah.
there for the
Yeah.
Depression. 26.
Yeah.
Your mother, auntie, and your father were born there, the Depression babies.
But just the same as
Yeah, yeah.
31,
Richard
32.
It was after, yeah.
It changed Richard's outlook on life. He's never gotten over it. He's always
serious, much more serious.
Yeah, sure.
And
With his hotel stationery.
Oldest child.
That's Richard.
Yeah, David can end up like that.
No,
I can't see David being quite so
Two-year-old hotel stationery like his uncle.
When the young utility babies was asked like
No, the
most
oldest,
insufferable. Is that what you mean?
oldest is the most sensible.
Is that, were you the oldest?
Brother.
I'm not gonna say anything. Youngest rules in this place.
Recording.